Welcome. Today we're having a COVID-19 forum organized by State Representative Josh Cutler. This panel will concentrate on disability workplace matters. You can watch this forum in our viewing area on our government and public channels or on PAC TV's live streaming channel Prime, which you can view at pactv.org/live. This is also being streamed on Josh's Facebook page. If you have any questions during this forum, aside from the ones you've sent to Josh, you can email them to questions@pactv.org. And for replay times, visit pactv.org/regional. Josh will introduce his special guest for today's forum. Welcome, Josh. And he needs to turn.
Oh, let me start over. Sorry about that. I should know better by now, huh? Want to thank PAC TV and you, Julie, for all the great work that you're doing to allow us to, host these forums. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. I really appreciate that and all the great work that your team is doing. So we have a great show for you this morning, and I'm very pleased to have along with me to co-host the chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. That's Kay Kahn. I've had the pleasure of serving as her vice chair for this term, and she's been wonderful to work with and is just an absolute treasure of knowledge about all these issues. And so we're delighted to have her on to help co-host the show. So welcome, Madam Chair. Kay, good to see you. Oh, and I think Kay did the same thing I did. It's catching. Take two. Hey, Kay. Good morning.
Okay. So, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Rep. Cutler, for inviting me. Sorry?
You're good. Go ahead.
Anyway, thank you so much, Representative Cutler, for inviting me to join you today on this forum. And it's on an issue that is so important to our committee. And I just want to really highlight the work that you've done this session on what we call the Workability Subcommittee. And this has just brought amazing light to the issues that the committee has supported. And the committee really is so grateful to support your efforts to promote opportunities for persons with disabilities so that they can participate and succeed in the workforce. Very important. And today's forum is another great opportunity to provide helpful information to those who may need it. And I really want to thank all the panelists who are here today for joining us. And I really look forward to learning from you. And we have some questions. So we're grateful to be able to participate this morning, answer some questions for individuals, and get your advice actually for individuals with disabilities who have work-related questions. So really looking forward to the panel this morning, and thank you again, Vice Chair Cutler, for inviting me to join you. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Well, that's great. Well, we'll jump right in. Let me introduce our panelists, and then we're going to give each of them a chance to just quickly tell us about their organization, and then we'll move over to some questions. Wanted to let folks listening live on PAC TV or on Facebook let you know that you're welcome to share questions with us, and we'll try to address them on air if we're able to. So first up, let me introduce all three of the panelists. We have Brian Forsythe, who is the project coordinator and benefits counseling for Work Without Limits out of UMass. Great organization. Delighted to have Kerry Mahoney, who's the Director of Education and Outreach for the ARC of Massachusetts, very well known, great advocacy organization. And Tom Murphy is a senior attorney at the Disability Law Center, which is a great resource for folks. So we're very pleased to have a distinguished panel. I'm going to now turn it over to Brian first to just give us a quick intro and welcome. So Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Josh, for having me today. I'm honored to be here. So let me tell you a little bit about Work Without Limits and what I do. Work Without Limits is an initiative of UMass Medical School's Commonwealth Medicine. It primarily is made up of a couple of parts. We have an employer engagement team whose job is to instruct and advise employers on hiring, maintaining, and promoting individuals with disabilities in the workplace. We also have a small employment network that assists clients with ticket to work issues while they're working. And we have the benefits counseling team, which is what I'm part of. I'm actually a CWIC or a community work incentive counselor. which is part of a WIPA grant or Work Incentive Planning Assistance paid for or funded by Social Security. Our main goal is to work with individuals receiving benefits, either SSI or SSDI, who are working or looking to go to work. And our job is to help them understand what's going to happen to all of their benefits, or SSI, SSDI, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, public housing, when they go to work. In other words, what's going to happen to those benefits? Why will you be most likely better off working than just staying on benefits alone? Who do you have to tell? What do you have to tell them? And we're also there in case there's an issue, we can help resolve that issue with any of those public benefit systems.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian. A great introduction. And now we'll let Kerry join us and just give a quick hello. Kerry, unmute yourself. Hello, Kerry.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to participate today. Kerry Mahoney from the ARC of Massachusetts. Hopefully many of you know about the ARC. We're the state organization, and we work across the state with 17 affiliates who actually do more of programs and services. What we do is our main mission is advocacy, education, outreach. So we're busy working with all the legislators, trying to make sure the voice of people with disabilities is well heard and their caregivers and families. And the other thing about the ARC is that we also link with the ARC in the United States and other state affiliates throughout the country. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. All right. And last, certainly not least, Tom, and he already unmuted himself, so he's learning quick. We have Tom Murphy, the senior attorney at the Disability Law Center. Tom, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on today. It's a pleasure to be here. So Disability Law Center is the protection and advocacy system for Massachusetts. We provide legal advocacy to promote the rights of people with disabilities through legal advice, direct representation, and by engaging in systemic activities such as litigation. As a protection and advocacy agency, we have authority under federal statutes to monitor and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect any place where a person with a disability lives or receives services or treatment. And that can include hospitals, nursing homes, congregate living facilities, schools, juvenile detention facilities, and jails and prisons. Our monitoring authority is very broad. It provides us with a wide range of access, including unaccompanied access to records and information, as well as to the individuals themselves who are being served and the physical spaces within any facility. We also prioritize certain types of legal issues for individual legal advocacy, such as employment, housing, public accommodations, education, voting rights, and human rights issues. Some of the COVID-related issues that we've been working on over the last couple of months include working on providing input to the Commonwealth's Crisis Standards of Care Plan, working with group homes to ensure that residents and staff are adequately protected and using PPE and addressing safety issues, monitoring hospitals and nursing homes for their preparedness and response around health and safety issues and concerns, advocacy related to hospital visitation policies, collaborating with other advocates on issues related to special education, working with state agencies around issues regarding reporting and transparency. And we also provide individual advocacy on housing issues. We've done advocacy on issues related to the Commonwealth's new mask order, which I'd like to point out does contain an exemption for medical related reasons, as well as employment issues, including accommodations that employees may need either while they're working from home or as they transition back to their usual physical workspace.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your expertise. We'll turn it over now. We're going to do we have some great questions that we're going to put to you all to get some great information out. And for the first question, I'm going to turn it over to Madam Chair, who, if you could unmute yourself and then jump in with the first question, we'll get started. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see. We First of all, I want to thank all of you, the panelists, for being here today. And I think that as we have been sort of moved into this COVID-19 situation, I really want to thank the advocates for the disability community. Everyone has been amazing, and we've had an opportunity, Vice Chair Cutler and myself, to be on Zoom calls, many Zoom calls with the many of the advocates, and really thank you all for the amount of support and work that you've been doing so that we can manage the situation that we're in, this unprecedented situation. So I do have some questions that I thought it might be worth taking a look at. And just maybe some questions first. I'll start out with questions for Tom Murphy. And again, thank you for your presentation. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what should a tenant do, for example, if they're living in a situation where the landlord sort of sends a notice to quit or take some other action and puts pressure on them to leave the situation that they're in. Maybe even go as far as changing locks or shutting utilities. And so we're very worried about folks who, with disabilities who are living in situations that landlords might want to see change. So I just wondered if you could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So first and foremost, Massachusetts enacted an eviction moratorium, and that is currently in place. And that means that all non-essential evictions are on hold until either August 18th or 45 days after the state of emergency is lifted, whichever is sooner. Although the legislation also allows the governor to extend the moratorium in up to 90-day increments if the governor feels that will be necessary. So currently, evictions can only be brought where a tenant violates a term or condition of their lease and engages in criminal activity. And the violation may impact the health or safety of other residents or anyone else who is legally on the premises. So in other words, evictions right now cannot be filed in court. And remember, in Massachusetts, an eviction case is called summary process. So summary process cases cannot be filed. Landlords cannot terminate tenancies by serving a notice to quit or any other notice that a tenancy is being terminated. And for eviction cases that were filed and pending before the moratorium was enacted, those cases are all on hold, and any deadlines are extended until after the emergency order is lifted and courts reopen for full business. Importantly as well, constables and sheriffs, which often have the task ultimately of moving someone out of their apartment after they've been evicted, can no longer do that. They will not be acting on what are known as executions while the moratorium is in place. For landlords, it is illegal for a landlord to take what's known as self-help to evict someone by changing the locks, shutting off utilities, anything of that nature. That is illegal. It's also illegal to threaten or harass a tenant to try to get the tenant to voluntarily leave their apartment. And this applies to all tenants, whether they have a lease, whether they're a tenant at will, or even a tenant in sufferance, which is a person who is living under neither a lease or any other sort of formal arrangement. So any tenant who is illegally being forced out of their home or receives a notice to quit or is being harassed by their landlord should either, if there's a physical action happening, like someone is there trying to physically move them out, in that instance, they should call the police. In other instances, they can call the Attorney General, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. They have a consumer hotline. The number is 617-727-8400. And I believe we're including the website for the Attorney General's office in this broadcast as well. Or they can contact DLC or their local legal services office, which in the Plymouth area is South Coastal County's legal service.
Great.
Well, I think that information is really helpful. I guess the one question I have is, um, wouldn't that apply anyway, even if we weren't in an emergency situation? Um, aren't tenants protected? You know, particularly those with any kind of disability, in any case, without even being in the situation that we're in now. I'm just wondering if you might mention that or talk about that a little.
Of course. So yes, every tenant is protected from what are known as self-help measures. So, so landlords cannot take it upon themselves to evict someone or move someone out without having engaged in the formal court process, which is known as summary process. So that there is no change to that. The biggest change, which has occurred as a result of the COVID crisis, is the eviction moratorium, which means that landlords cannot even start that process. They cannot send a notice to quit, which is usually the first step in that eviction process, and they cannot file cases. So there is, except in emergency situations where the health or safety of others is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the biggest difference, that landlords can take no affirmative action at all with respect to any tenant to either initiate or engage in the eviction process until, again, August 18th or 45 days after the state of emergency is lifted.
Tom, can I jump in? You know, in the workplace, obviously, you know, as we sort of start the transition back to work for many sectors, obviously in the workplace, if you're a person with a disability, in some cases, you may need some kind of accommodation made, a reasonable accommodation made in the workplace. So I guess the question is, for folks with disability, employees with disabilities who are working from home, are they entitled to reasonable accommodations in that scenario?
They are, yes. So just as prior to the COVID crisis, employees with disabilities are entitled to reasonable accommodations in their workplace. So just the same as if the physical workplace, again, prior to the crisis, was an office space or the premises owned by the business owner, the employee would be entitled to the same types of reasonable accommodations as they are working from home. Now, obviously, what those accommodations are will necessarily differ if they're working from home. There may be some overlap, but there may be some changes as well. So the same rules apply as previously with respect to reasonable accommodations. Employees are required to, in most instances, make the request for the accommodation and establish that there is a disability related link, that the employee needs the accommodation in order to perform an essential function of their job. And again, just to reiterate, an accommodation itself is any change to the different aspects of the person's job, changes to policies, physical changes in the workplace, any sort of change that an employee with a disability needs in order to perform the essential functions of their job. And then once that request is made, the employer is required under the law to engage in what's known as an interactive process with them in order to determine an accommodation which will actually work and be provided. So the interactive process really is the key to reasonable accommodation for employees with disabilities. And it's important, especially for employees, to be aware that it's a two-way street. So employers as well as employees are expected to engage in the interactive process in good faith. And so sometimes that means that an employee does not necessarily get the specific accommodation that they've first requested. The purpose of the interactive process is to establish an accommodation which is going to work for both the employer and the employee, and give the employee the ability to perform the essential functions of their job. And sometimes that's going to be a little bit different. Employers during that process can suggest alternatives that might be easier to implement or less costly. And as long as the accommodation that is being offered by the employer who's engaging in that interactive process in good faith, as long as that is effective, meaning that it allows the employee to perform the essential functions of his or her job, then it is an accommodation that the employee should accept.
And let me ask one quick follow-up, and then I'll turn it back over to Kay. That addressed in the home when you're working from home, but what about a person with disabilities who's outside of the workplace, somewhere else, such as traveling or commuting to work, or in a public area, and when they encounter discrimination or experience a lack of accessibility, what can be done about those sort of issues?
Outside of the workplace, in other aspects of
Yes.
life in the public.
Yes.
So obviously, I think most people are aware discrimination can occur in many different ways with respect to people with disabilities. It can include denial of services in places of public accommodation. So, for example, if a person requires the use of a service animal and they're denied entry to a store, that would be considered discrimination. A lack of effective communication. So, for example, someone who is deaf, who is denied an ASL interpreter when they visit a doctor or a lawyer's office. And there can be physical barriers as well that can constitute discrimination. So, for example, in relatively new construction, if a building is constructed that's not fully accessible, or there are existing barriers in older buildings that can fairly easily and inexpensively be removed, but are not, that can be a form of discrimination as well. It can also be discrimination for a failure to modify a policy, where a person with a disability needs a modification to that policy in order to fully participate in the particular activity. So, for example, a person with an intellectual disability may require that when they're voting, they have someone with them to help them through the voting process. If they're denied that support person, that can be a form of discrimination as well. So any of these forms of discrimination can be actionable. And in Massachusetts, complaints can be filed with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, or depending on the circumstances, other state agencies like the Architectural Access Board for buildings and physical barriers. And there are also various federal agencies that accept complaints of discrimination based on disability as well. And again, it depends on the particular issue or the setting. So that could be either the Department of Justice or the Department of Education, if we're talking about someone who's being denied effective services or is being discriminated against in an educational setting. And Disability Law Center can help guide individuals through that alphabet soup of agencies and help them try to figure out which agency would be the best to address their particular problem.
Great. So I just want we're going to turn it over to Kay for a question, but I wanted to address to all of our panelists. Feel free, even if we're addressing a question to one particular person here, if you have some expertise you'd like to jump in with that, feel free to kind of raise your hand or jump in. We welcome a little bit of conversation back and forth. So I guess we're going to turn to Brian now, and Chairwoman Khan has some other questions, I believe. So Brian, you're in the hot seat.
Okay.
And Kay, you did the same thing I did. You got to unmute yourself. I'm sorry, I set a bad tenor for the start of this. Go ahead.
So I actually, I just wanted to make a recommendation before I ask some questions. And I just thought that it's really great to hear from, hold on.
Not that person.
It's really, no, I think I wanted to thank Tom for the information that he gave us. And I just hope that there's going to be something posted on the website, because I think it's really helpful if people know who to call or where to turn. And so I think that's really great information to definitely have out there, because that's often when you're in a difficult situation, it's hard to know where to turn. So having that information posted, I think, and maybe he already said that he would be doing that, but I think that would be a good thing to do. So for Brian, and again, thank you for your presentation. And so I'm just wondering, in the situation that we're in, I mean, there are questions. So, for example, with the economy starting to open up again, what should individuals who are looking for work to be aware of? I think just wondering if you might be able to address that.
Well, yeah, it's going to go back to what an individual with a disability or collecting benefits has always had to concern themselves about. They have to know what benefit they're receiving. They also want to know what are the impact of those benefits when they go back to work. So they're going to want to be able to know, how many hours are they looking at? What's the rate of pay? Is that going to affect my SSI? Is it going to affect my SSDI? So really, there's a number of factors that are going to be impacted by that. So if someone, like say, if someone's on SSI, they need to know that as soon as they go back to work, the amount of money that I'm going to receive on SSI is going to go down. So it's important that I understand that, when I start the job search process. If someone's on SSDI, they need to know that, I can work for a certain amount of time, at any rate of pay without it being affected by without my benefits being affected. And once again, working with a benefits specialist or a community work incentive counselor, which is what I do, can help them understand where they are in that process. We usually advocate with people on when you're looking for a job, think about what's going to happen to your benefits and what you want to happen to your benefits before before you accept the job, so that up front, this is the job I want, this is what it's going to do to my benefits, and I'm comfortable with that. The one thing you don't want to do is to go out and get a job you think it's a great idea, then later on find out that it's going to cause a problem, because that's only going to cause stress that you really don't need.
So I'm just wondering, obviously it seems that you are a benefits counselor,
Yes.
or you provide benefits counseling. So how do they know who to contact, or is there a number that you can put out there that people could think about? And I'm also wondering if you work with Mass Rehab, because that's one of the agencies that we oversee on the committee. So I didn't know whether some of that is through Mass Rehab. So,
well, there are actually two different programs in Massachusetts that provide benefits counseling through the WIPA, or Work Incentive Planning Assistance Grant, funded by Social Security. One is Work Without Limits Benefits Counseling. We cover Middlesex County, Worcester County, Hampden, Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire counties, and 7 counties in New York. The remainder of the counties, Suffolk, Essex, Bristol, Duke, the Cape and the Islands, those are covered by a program called Project Impact, which is actually run out of Mass Rehab in Boston. Okay. If someone lives in our territory, they can always call us at 877-937-9675. If they're in Mass Rehab or Project Impact's territory, they can be reached at 1-800-734-7475. And in both cases, the service is going to be the same. You're going to be meeting with an individualized meeting with a benefits counselor who will go over what benefits you have, what your job plans are, and how those two are going to mesh together. Mass Rehab, although, is actually probably our largest referral source. So we we work with Mass Rehab, we work with, Mass Commission for the Blind, DDS, and all of the smaller agencies will all funnel referrals through to us, because they're all doing the same thing. Their job is to help people with disabilities get back to work. And we learned a long time ago that if you couldn't address the benefit portion of it, it's not going to be as successful as you hope.
So does that mean that, so I'm just wondering how that works with the employer. So for example, if someone is coming to you for benefit counseling,
Mhm.
do you also work with the employer, or is it up to the employee to try to address that with the employer, or can they get some support around that?
It's usually left to the individual to do that. And our counseling will help that individual more or less, understand what's going to go on so that they can make that choice. So then they'll go to the employer and say, gee, I can only, I would only like to work part-time rather than full-time. Right. We usually see clients at the beginning of their job search process.
Mhm.
So that they're going to know, oh, the best thing for me is to only work for work part-time. So they're only going to look for part-time employment. Other people are saying, I would really like to, get off of benefits. All right. So we're going to counsel them, this is how it's going to, what you have to do. And that's going to give them obviously a lot more leeway when they're talking to an employer.
Mhm.
Right.
Tom?
Can
If
I
I-
jump in and ask a question? And then Tom, right after that, happy to grab you. Brian, what is the impact of the stimulus, the federal stimulus payments? The $1,200 in different amounts. What is the impact that would have on with the person's benefits?
The short answer is really nothing.
Okay.
But I mean, we really should walk it through step by step. For individuals on SSDI or Social Security disability insurance, which is just that, it's federally funded long-term disability insurance, there's no impact at all because that benefit, that EIP or the stimulus payment is unearned income and has no effect. For individuals on SSI, it's not going to be considered income on the day that it's received, and it's not going to go against their $2,000 resource limit for 12 months after receipt, so it won't affect SSI. The VA sort of mirrors the Social Security system in that there is a needs-based program, which is disability pension, and then there is disability payments, which are non. And in both cases, they're going to follow the same rules. It's not for people who are receiving disability payments, service connected. It's not going to affect them at all. For people receiving disability pension, it won't be considered income in the month received, and it won't be considered part of the resource for 12 continuous months after that.
Okay.
All right.
Tom, did you want to jump in on something there?
No, thanks. I just wanted to add to Brian's previous question, answer to Representative Khan's question regarding working with employers as someone transitions back to work from benefits. I wanted to point out that dovetails with reasonable accommodation because a lot of times an employee who is going back to work after having received benefits or while they're still receiving benefits is going to need to engage in some sort of reasonable accommodation process. Not all the time, but many times. So there really is a synthesis there between transitioning off of benefits and reasonable accommodation. And we've worked very closely with Work Without Limits and with Brian in particular in the past in training individuals to understand that it's important to get legal advice regarding reasonable accommodations that might be required so that a person can truly be successful as they transition back to work.
Great. So Kerry, we want to get you involved. If you could unmute yourself, I think Chairwoman Khan is going to jump in with some questions. We good?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so so you're whoops, I'm unmuted, I guess. Okay.
We're good.
Yeah. So we've really do a lot of work with ARC. So I'm really pleased that you're here this afternoon. So I had a few questions, and I just wondered. So what should a family? I'm just thinking about a family in terms of an emergency plan. Do families, are they encouraged to have some sort of emergency plan when, particularly right now when we're in this situation? And what would that look like? What would having an emergency plan actually look like?
Okay, sure. Yes, actually, we provided a webinar a few weeks ago just on what is emergency planning, because in this crisis, it really brings it to light for so many of us. So, having good documentation about your loved ones, their needs, their medications, their contacts. People complete what we call a letter of intent, which is not a legal document, but it's a document that really encompasses all of the information that an alternative caregiver would need to know. There's also legal planning, which is very, very, very important. Having a will, having power of attorney, having healthcare proxy in place, that sort of thing. And then on the other side of planning is also looking at perhaps a special needs trust. But I think what's most important right now is really kind of looking at your family networks and your own support systems. I just heard about a family this morning that both the parents have tested positive for COVID-19. So the mom is in the hospital and the dad is at home trying to care for his son. And so, just looking at what are the resources out there if you were not able to provide care. And you can also work with family support centers to do this. Your people from the Department of Developmental Services. Sometimes you're going to need alternative people to come in, and sometimes you have those natural supports. So very important.
That's great. I also heard that the ARC has started some focus groups. And I
Yes, yes.
talk a little bit about that and what that's all about.
Sure. So, it's important that we're always listening to families, because families and caregivers and individuals, they're the ones, with the boots on the ground, and we need to know what's going well, what's not going well, and what are their recommendations. So anyways, in the past couple of weeks, we've done 3 focus groups. Done one for families who have their loved ones at home with significant behavioral challenges. Another one for in families who have their kids in residential services, and many of them are going on 2 months now without being able to see their sons and daughters. And then another focus group we did was for adults that are home without day programs. So as you can imagine, stress and anxiety are very high right now, especially for families who have those kids with behavioral challenges. They're out of their routines. Many are not able to, engage in virtual learning. And so it's the onus of the parent to be able to provide the activities, the structures, and that sort of thing. Many times needing more one-to-one type of situations. Another problem is not everybody's comfortable about bringing strangers into the home, even though that may be available. There's still a need for more PPE for both the families and the caregivers. Families are going through their PPE supplies much faster because their kids are home all the time. And so, being able to access that. In terms of, families who are facing not being able to see their kids for a couple of months, it's heartbreaking for some. And just, more recommendations on how can families engage with their loved ones. And, even be able to do, use PPE to go visit, maybe go for a walk, but other than just doing technology FaceTime. And then, there's a lot of anxiety too about the reopening. What is that going to look like? Because it's a challenge both for the families who are returning to work, as well as what will the new adult or school services look like, and how are they going to be able to balance both? So it's not an easy time, as you can imagine.
So, Rep. Cutler, if you don't mind, if I could just put in a little plug for Newton,
Of course.
since I'm representing Newton.
Yes, very well, I might add.
Thank you. And just a little something that I found out about, I wasn't aware of, but the Newton Parks and Recreation Department apparently has something 3 times a day. They have a program that is offering people, young people that are at home that have disabilities. It gives a little bit of respite to the family members. And apparently they offer dance programs and, some physical activities, all kinds of activities that apparently are helpful, because many of these people are people that have had jobs or have some jobs that they're doing in their communities. And now they're not able to do that. So they're kind of lost in terms of what they can do during the day. So apparently 3 times a day, the Newton Parks and Recreation Department has has programs that these folks can tune into and do all kinds of activities that are provided by the program. So I just throw that out. You might want to take a look at it. Maybe you'd like to do it have them do it down in your community, Rep Cutler. But I did hear that it's been very successful, and that the folks that are participating are very excited about it and love it.
Great.
So.
Well, that's a good segue. Again, we're here, being broadcast through PAC TV, and we want to emphasize the importance of community access television and thank the good folks at PAC TV for doing this. But we're also going to be rebroadcast on the Talking Information Center. And I should note that we'll be putting this up on YouTube, and we will make closed captioning available. We aren't able to do it for this particular show just for technical reasons, but we will be doing that, and also be rebroadcasting on the Talking Information Center, and hopefully up on Newton Cable Access and other areas as well. So thank you all for that. Kerry, I had a follow-up kind of question for you, if you don't mind. Many folks, many IDD individuals rely on job coaches for their work. How is job coaching looking moving forward in this era of COVID-19?
Well, there's, it's a work in progress, I think. There, as Representative Khan talked about, there's some wonderful virtual programs going on. Lots of different, exercise and music and cooking and crafts, and a lot of family support centers are providing them, as well as day programs. I was speaking with somebody whose daughter receives job support through Best Buddies, and she was participating in some virtual programs on how to return back to work. So kind of really examining, what kind of, the social distancing, the mask, what's going to be expected of her. So a lot of prep right now, and that can be done beautifully through virtual programs. I think we're learning far more on how to provide these services virtually. So with check-ins and Facebook time, and just being able to connect with people, I think we're just all learning how to do things differently.
Yeah, I thought of another question, if you don't mind. And this might be actually more for Tom, but feel free anyone to jump at this. In terms of, so for employers, what kind of questions can they ask their employees related to COVID-19 symptoms? And then as sort of a second part, can employers ask their employees who have symptoms, COVID symptoms, to stay home? Tom, could you address those? Anybody else who wants to jump in afterwards?
Yeah, that's really a great question, and it's so relevant today, and will become more relevant, I think, as the weeks go on, and more businesses start to open up and people start to transition back to their regular workplaces. Normally, there are restrictions on the types of questions that employers can ask about medical issues or disability-related issues. But with respect to COVID, it's still, because it's so new, it's unclear whether having COVID itself would, in and of itself, constitute a disability if someone recovers and doesn't have any underlying health conditions that are exacerbated or ongoing issues related to their having had the virus. It's unclear at this point whether they would be protected under anti-discrimination laws as a person with a disability. But either way, the EEOC has come out with some pretty good guidance on the transition back to work types of issues that you're asking about. And specifically, the EEOC has taken the position that employers can ask questions of employees related to symptoms of COVID-19, and as well as take their temperature and possibly actually perform tests, as long as the tests that they're using are accurate and reliable. Query exactly what that's going to mean, but that's the position that the EEOC has taken. It's important to note, though, that any information that's collected in this regard about employees who are coming back to the workplace must be kept confidential in a separate file, separate from their regular employment file. So, I would caution employers against using COVID-19, though, as an excuse to kind of get into other types of disability related questions and issues with their employees. Normally, employers should not do that unless they have a particular reason for doing so. For example, if an employee requests a reasonable accommodation. And it's also important for employers, I think, to remember that employees coming back to the workplace will need accommodations that are directly related to COVID and may be different from the types of accommodations that they had in place before the crisis started. So, for example, an employee may need to have their job temporarily changed so that they don't have as much physical contact with coworkers or with customers. They may need some physical change in the workplace so that they have more protection. If they're immunocompromised or otherwise more vulnerable to the virus or bad effects from having gotten it. And so just as with other reasonable accommodation issues, the employer should address all of those quickly and engage in a good faith interactive process with the employee. Some of those accommodations also could include at this point continuing to work from home, even if an employer says we want everyone to come back in. If an employee, again, who is at a greater risk because of an underlying medical issue, needs to continue to work from home, that can be considered an ongoing reasonable accommodation.
Well, we're going to turn it back over to Kay. Just want to acknowledge we have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to save time at the end for each of you to plug your contact info again and organizations. So just keep that in mind. So I think Madam Chair is going to has a question for maybe a wild card question. Who let's see what direction she goes in.
Okay. Well, I just think that it would be interesting to talk about how the landscape has changed with COVID ID, and certainly for the disability community in the workplace, at home, and daily living. I feel that there's really a silver lining here, because it seems to me, and this is just my perspective, that there's a lot more out there to accommodate folks with disabilities. As you mentioned, all the virtual programs that are out there, and just being able to do what we're doing this morning, which is really educating the public about what is available for folks with disabilities. And again, I also have to really commend all of you for the work that you've been doing for the disability community. But I just wondered if you might talk a little bit about, and it's really open to any one of you, how you see the landscape changing, and what we can really anticipate in the future, because I don't think this is going to go away quickly. And who knows, maybe I think we have learned a lot of things at this time that will help us move forward in very positive ways for the disability community. So just wondered what your thoughts are and how you see things as we go forward under the circumstances that we're in. It's open to any one of you.
I'll jump in if that's okay. I think that there will be potentially more emphasis on allowing employees to telecommute, which in the past has been somewhat contentious in terms of reasonable accommodation issues. Obviously, there are many jobs that can't be performed at home, but for those that can, I think we're learning through this process that telecommuting can be a very effective way to have employees perform their jobs and not have to engage in activities such as commuting, which for many people, especially in the eastern part of the state, I happen to live in the western part of the state, so it's not as bad here, but issues like commuting can really be a drain on employers and employees, I think. And so I think we are learning a lot about what it means to perform a job and do it well.
I agree with. Yeah, I agree with Tom. I mean, we're learning a lot. Even in our own, our own setting. Prior to COVID-19, working from home was frowned upon. And now there are departments that are saying it's just going to be the new norm. And that's going to make it a lot more opportunities for individuals with disabilities, a lot of whom can't commute and really do need to work from home. And those jobs are very hard to find. I think we're going to find now that those opportunities are going to be a lot more than they had been in the past.
Hey, Brian, can I ask?
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, Brian, I was going to ask a quick follow-up just because we're just actually just today was announced by Governor Baker's team that some of the new the extended unemployment benefits, the extra 13 weeks, will now be eligible. People are now eligible for. And so it made me think just, the intersection of unemployment payments and people who have disabilities getting their benefits. Could you address that situation if someone's unemployed, receiving unemployment, and then how that would affect their benefits as a person with a disability?
Yeah, certainly. Well, we're going to have to do the same thing. We're going to have to go through it benefit by benefit. For someone on SSDI, unemployment, including regular unemployment and the PUC, are considered unearned income and therefore have no effect on SSDI at all. For people on SSI or supplemental security income, which is a needs-based program, that income is going to be counted and most likely will actually cause someone SSI to be suspended, not stopped, suspended while they're receiving it. But given the amount of money that they could potentially receive on unemployment, they'll actually be better off financially. It won't affect anybody's health insurance because Mass Health has already made that determination, and Medicare doesn't look at income. The one issue that we do have with individuals on SSI is because that income is counted and they are held to that $2,000 resource limit, that's going to have to be monitored. But there are ways, they could, put the money into an ABLE account, or if they have a special needs trust, to do that. Because unlike the stimulus payment, the unemployment, it would go against that $2,000 resource limit. But with careful planning, once again, you're going to be better off financially, and it's not going to have a very large impact, because even if it stops your SSI while you get it, when the unemployment runs out, with a simple phone call from Social Security, the SSI will come back.
Okay, great. So again, we're almost out of time here, but Madam Chair, do you have any more questions you wanted to throw to our panel?
So yes, I'll ask one more question. And first of all, I'm just wondering, all of the information that you've provided us today is really helpful. I think I heard somebody mention webinar. Are you doing any invitations to webinars to folks who have disabilities or families that are coping with a family member with a disability? And also, just to add to that a little bit, how can people get involved in organizations? I think it would be really nice if folks know that there is a way to get involved to be helpful.
Sure. I'd be happy to let you know what's going on at the ARC of Massachusetts. So we've been offering webinars 4 days a week throughout the COVID crisis. And Mondays is with our executive director, Leo Sarkisian. And basically, he gives an overview of what things happen in the state in terms of policy, in terms of services, in terms of legislation, and also what's happening on the federal side as well. On Tuesdays, I do a webinar and provide people with problem solving and information and support. So last week, we heard from a family who shared her story about getting through a day in her life. She's caring for her 27-year-old son, who's in a wheelchair and needs total care. So it's just wonderful to hear the resilience from these families and what they're going through and how they're getting through day by day. We've also had some information on stress and anxiety. How do you manage that during this time? On Thursdays, Maura Sullivan, our Director of Government Affairs, provides an overview of what's going on in the state. We've done a lot around access to a support person with the Disability Law Center and others in terms of if your sons or daughters needed to be hospitalized. And then on Fridays, we have Ellen Taverna, our policy officer, and she links with the ARC of the United States and has provided several webinars and speakers going on the federal issues around the CARES Act, the stimulus payments, and now we're monitoring the HEROES Act that we're hoping that will get passed, because there's a lot of disability services in there that we're got our fingers crossed that it's gonna be passed in the Senate. So anyways, please feel free to hop on our website and check us out. We probably update our website maybe sometimes once a day. Things are moving fast. Things are changing fast, and we want to always hear from you. So please join us and please reach out.
Great.
Thanks.
Sounds great. Does anybody else have something to add to that?
If people are interested in learning more about Work Without Limits, we do have a very robust website, workwithoutlimits.org. We have a page on COVID-19 resources that are updated on, as information comes in. There's also a blog that people can read on how the stimulus payments and unemployment affect benefits. We also work with a number of employers. We're part of a national organization called Disability In. And if employers are interested in learning more about helping individuals with disabilities return and stay or be promoted in the job, we contact Work Without Limits. Would be more than happy to reach out to you.
Fabulous.
And I'll just add, the best way to get information about DLC is to drop us an email indicating that you would like to be on our email list. So that can be at mail@dlc-ma.org, or visit our website, which is dlc-ma.org. We have a lot of information there, or like our Facebook page. And that's where we will announce any initiatives, trainings, or that sort of thing that we're planning.
I think
Amazing.
for folks who,
information.
oh, sorry. We had, I guess we just had a brief glitch. We're good now. I think on Facebook, there might've been a brief interruption there. So apologies to anyone who might've missed anything. Hopefully not. And we did have some questions in the Facebook stream, and in terms of follow, we'll try to do our best to follow up on those individually. And for folks who do have questions, though, again, maybe you could reiterate one final time. We just have about 2 minutes left. What's the best way? And again, some folks are watching this, and some people are just listening on the radio. What is the best way to follow up with detailed questions for each of your organizations?
I'll start again. The email address for DLC would be the best way to do that.
Okay.
Which is mail@dlc-ma.org.
And for us, you could reach out through our website, which is workwithoutlimits.org. There is a contact us button in the top right. You could fill out that form, and your question would then be routed to the appropriate staff member. And by phone, you can reach us at 877-937-9675.
And for the ARC of Massachusetts, encourage you to visit the website, thearcofmass.org. And if you have specific questions, I'm more than happy to be contacted. My email at the ARC is Mahoney, MAHONEY, @arcmass.org.
Great. And again, I just want to reiterate to folks who may be listening, we're joined here by House Chairwoman Kay Khan, the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities. And I know that our committee and our great staff, thank you, by the way, to all our great staff that helped out with this event, are here to help and be a resource, and we definitely want to be that. So if you have questions of a legislative nature or policy-related questions, please let us know. I'm going to turn it back over to Kay just for some final remarks, but I want to thank all of our great panelists for participating today. We had a lot of great material. I think we covered a lot of almost everything, not quite, but almost everything. And I want to really thank you for taking the time out and for all that you do to be an advocate for folks with disabilities. So thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, PAC TV, for all the great work. And I'll now let the Chairwoman Khan have a final word.
Thank you, Representative Cutler. And I want to again thank you for putting this all together and all the work that you've been doing with the subcommittee of our committee. And it's really all very important work, and I want to thank all of you who came today to participate. I think we got wonderful information, and again, people can contact any one of us if they have any more questions. We're happy to be available, and really, I think I'm very impressed with the disability community as a whole. I think you do amazing work, and we have been very fortunate. I think we're fortunate to live here in Massachusetts, where there are so many good things going on. And we also have obviously lots of connections across the country with what's going on in other states. So I think we're, again, very fortunate to have you, really fortunate to have Representative Cutler, who has really put a lot of effort into all that he does as a member of the committee and our subcommittee, and just really appreciate having the opportunity to be here this morning. I've notified the Newton New TV about this, and hopefully we'll be able to connect and have it shown in my community. And again, just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Great. We need to turn it back over to Julie at PAC TV at the back of the home base to close us out. Julie, are you there?
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. And yeah, there's a couple glitches today in technology. Sometimes the bandwidth goes in and out. Just be assured that the recording of this will be able to be seen in its entirety, pactv.org/regional. So if you missed anything for any reason, your internet, whatever, it is available there. We date stamp this as we do everything that we record here at PAC TV, so you know that the information that you received today was date specific. Josh, thank you so much for putting together these regional forums. You do different subjects each week, and they are really timely and really valuable. My one question is, all the resources that were talked about today, will those be available on your website, or where can people go for the general all-out sense of resourcing from today's show?
Yeah, Julie, we'll be happy. We'll take all the websites and everything from all of our great panelists, and I'll put them on my website, and I'm sure Chairwoman Khan can do that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you, guests. This was a really informative, really packed, information-packed full hour. We appreciate that. This is Julie Thompson from PAC TV wishing you a good day.